Or Alex is the brother.
Yeah.
Well, the second one was true.
It is true, but it's also not my name.
So we got a great show lined up for everyone this morning. We're going to be joined very shortly in the show by Adrienne Strong. She is one of the principals at the Danes Group Architects. Going to be talking, I think this is first architect
I do believe that is true.
that we've had on, which is going to be interesting because I always find it fascinating and highly important.
We've had remodelers, we've had structural engineers, we've had everything.
We had the structural engineer.
Yes.
We did have that.
Yeah.
But first time architecture, so we're really looking forward to that. It's a local business here in the area, so we're looking forward to speaking with her. We'll have a little finance later in the show. We'll have
Get ready for your
some
charts.
interesting. We have some new charts. Some new charts from Nick.
They're not fun charts. They're more like Alex charts.
Well, the crypto one is kind of interesting. So
Yeah, right.
We'll talk a little crypto.
The delinquency one is not.
The delinquency chart is not interesting, but the crypto.
Well, it's interesting,
but not
it's
fun.
not happy, yeah.
The crypto chart is a little more fun, so we'll be sure to share those with everyone. It's definitely a bright morning here in Charlotte.
A little warmer.
So, definitely a little warmer. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Today y Mañana. I'm Alex. This is Nick. We're very excited to have you joining us this morning on a very beautiful morning.
It's gorgeous.
It's going to be a nice spring day, I think, here in Charlottesville, Virginia. But it's still a great day to grab your café con leche, settle into a nice, comfortable place, and watch some Today y Mañana. Because we have a great show lined up for you. We're going to be joined shortly in the show by Adrienne Strong. She is a principal at the Danes Group Architects. Later, we'll have some finance topics. We'll talk some crypto, we'll talk some good news, some bad news.
So odd to be saying we're going to be talking crypto after you're like, well, we don't talk crypto.
Well, we don't invest clients by default in crypto.
Okay, that's a
we
better.
don't recommend crypto. How's
Yes,
that?
yeah.
But we can talk about it because I think there are interesting things that you can follow with where cryptocurrencies go and why people may or may not put their money into cryptocurrencies, even if we wouldn't recommend cryptocurrencies to be a significant part of your retirement.
Yeah,
savings.
should I put 80% in big? No, probably not. But.
Someone had asked me last night at a board meeting, hey, are you back to invest, putting your clients in crypto? And I always say it's always amazing the number of conversations that we have with crypto, the extent to which we get asked about crypto correlates basically with the price of crypto.
Yeah.
As cryptocurrency prices skyrocket, all these people come ask, hey, should I buy some, Bitcoin, right? And then when cryptocurrency prices collapse, no one asks us anything. No one
Which
ever
is the
asks,
opposite
is
of when
this a good
people should
time?
consider it.
Which is the opposite of kind of how it might work. A couple shout-outs. Ricardo Cruz Duran, amigo del programa. Thanks for watching the show this morning. Dr. Elizabeth Erpe watching the show this morning. Always.
And congrats to Ricardo.
Yes, and new position.
It was Johnny Ornelas. Thank you for watching this morning.
Oh, fantastic. Another great entrepreneur here in Charlottesville. Always appreciate that. A couple of course, thank yous. Love being here on the Alex Siegel Network set. A couple of thank yous. Thank you to Emergent Financial Services for being our presenter. Thanks to our great partners, Matias Young Realty, Credit Serious Insurance, Forward Adelante. I think Matias coming on next week, I believe, unless I'm mistaken. I think he's going to be joining us next week. But looking forward to that, and of course looking forward to today. And I don't know about you, but I'm ready to jump in.
I'm ready to go.
Let's do it. So we're excited to welcome to the show this morning Adrienne Strong. She is a principal at the Danes Group Architects. Adrienne, thanks so much for coming on this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
No, appreciate it. So maybe for those who haven't met you yet, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and how you first became interested in architecture in the field that you're in.
Sure. So I grew up in West Point, Virginia, just a small town between Williamsburg and Richmond. I don't remember when it clicked for me that I wanted to be an architect. I always wanted to be an author. I love books. But at some point in high school, it sort of crept into, hey, I think you'd be good at this. And then somebody told me that women don't become architects.
Oh.
And I like a good challenge.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
that sort of rocketed that career choice to number one, and I applied to UVA School of Architecture, and was a little nervous still going in about whether this career was it for me, but once I was there, it really felt natural. It felt like where I was supposed to be. So, and I love what I do.
So to explain a little, I guess, I think it's great for people who, I think the average person kind of knows a little bit of what an architect is. Like, okay, I think the average person probably knows you need an architect, or thinks you need an architect to build a house, because they draw it and then it gets built. But what kind of does that entail? What does it mean for people who are new to it to be an architect that you actually do on a day-to-day basis?
So what we are primarily is we're listeners. We listen to our clients. We listen to needs they have. We listen to problems they have with their current space, whether that's their home, their work, or any place that they occupy, and we try and figure out what the best way is to solve that problem for them. So we do pretty much everything from office upfits to additions or renovations for single family, all the way up to custom residential homes. We've done a 10,000 square foot house. And then we do multifamily projects, warehouse projects, school additions, churches, really a little bit of everything.
Everything that involves
so
like making a space, I guess, for...
Really listening to our clients, figuring out what they need, and making spaces that work for their needs.
That's fantastic. So how did you come to be part of the Gaines Group?
So I was part of a studio at UVA called EcoMod, where I was part of the second year of that project, and we did some relief work down for Hurricane Katrina. After Hurricane Katrina, we did a Habitat for Humanity house that we designed and built down there. And so I was busy. We were traveling back and forth a lot. I didn't have a chance to really apply many places. But the Gaines Group received my resume and called me in for an interview, and I happened to stop by on my way to construction, like in my dirty jeans and T-shirt, and we just really clicked. So they were all about sustainable construction and green design, and that really spoke my language. So I've been there ever since, so 2006.
Wow, that's
Wow.
wonderful.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Absolutely. So what are so I mean you mentioned different types of projects you were engaged in. What are some like recent projects or things that people might say, oh yeah, okay, I kind of know, I know something of that nature?
Yeah. So my specialty is multifamily. So the stuff I've been involved in locally are big apartment communities. So the Knoll up in Ruckersville, and the Summit Apartments at Old Trail. And then we just wrapped up 5-row apartments, which are currently leasing down in Albemarle County across from the county office buildings.
Oh yeah, not too far from here.
Yeah. They're beautiful apartments. The interior's worth stopping by to look at. But yeah, they're leasing up now. I think they're 5rowapartments.com, number 5. But yeah, I love the modern design of that project and the interior of the clubhouse. We did some really cool wood details that my team worked on. It's just beautiful.
So do you do both as an architect? Is it both? Because obviously it's the design of the space. In other words, the floor plan, how it looks, and so forth. Do you also go in, like how deep do you go in terms of how the interior will look from will it be wood, will there be crown molding here, will there be that? How detailed does it actually get from an architectural perspective?
So it really depends on the client and the project, but we do have an interiors team on our staff. So with that project in particular, we did the building design, the space layout. We helped with the community design, worked with the civil engineer there, Shimp Engineering, and but then went into the minuscule details, really designed the wood details inside all the way down to furniture selections. Wow. So we really did the full package there.
That's pretty neat that you can go to see. It must be exciting to see it from initial stage and know what it's going to look like all the way down to the
That's
the
why I
final
love
picture.
being a part of a small team, a small business, because I really can follow the project from the very first meeting all the way through to that final design. And a lot of the larger firms, there are different teams that get to work on that. But I
It's
love
passed on in a sense.
I love following from beginning to end.
Now, what are the challenges for building something like a multifamily structure? Because I would assume that, like, for a residential, you talk to the family, they have what they want. It's still probably complicated, but
Yeah.
now you have to appease a tremendous amount of people rather than just one person that has a vision.
And that's part of what I love.
Oh,
So
interesting.
I love going in from the very beginning, laying out the project on the site, because what we're doing is trying to build a community, really. And we're trying to build a community for everybody. So one of the things, again, that I take a special interest in is accessibility from the site point of view to the apartment layouts. To even the pool designs. So one of our projects over in Augusta County, the first apartment leased was to someone with a mobility issue because our pool had a ramp into it. And it had been one of those designs that had it was a really difficult design. I had spent a lot of time on it. And so just knowing that bit of data made all of that time I spent on solving that problem worth it. So,
Absolutely, someone that was able to say, this actually fits
right.
what I need.
Yeah, exactly. So designing for all people, designing for all abilities, it really takes, it's a hard problem to solve,
Right.
But designing a place that will accommodate a huge variety of people, I really love, so.
That's fantastic. Is it, and I'm guessing it's also different even from a structural perspective. So you're looking at totally different things of something of that size as opposed to a single family.
Yeah, so luckily we do have a structural design team and staff that can handle those small residential projects, which is really great because from the beginning we can consider what the project's going to need structurally. But when we get to something that's that large, like a multifamily project, we do work with different structural engineers on those.
On those, to make sure it holds up.
Yeah, exactly.
It holds
And
up
that's
nicely.
very important.
Absolutely. So I guess on that vein, when you go into like a multi-family project, what are kind of the things that people are thinking about now, architecturally speaking? Obviously, accessibility is one of them. Is it now maybe more green space or more things what are things that people are thinking about now from an architectural perspective of multifamily that maybe in the past they wouldn't have thought about?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so lately with the work remotely trend, we're seeing a lot of spaces both inside the clubhouse and outside on grounds that people can take their laptop and work because you don't always want to work in the same room every day. You want to work somewhere that makes you comfortable, work somewhere that makes you happy. So trying to create other places that people can go. Having things like a conference room, we put one of those in the 5-row clubhouse so that if somebody is working remotely, they have a place that they can go and meet clients.
Interesting. You don't even need to.
Now,
leave
was that accelerated by the pandemic, or was that already a trend that we started seeing a while ago?
It's sort of both. I think we started thinking about things like that before, but it really didn't take off until after the pandemic when everybody went remote and a lot of people just didn't go back to the office. So it's always been something we've thought about, but not to the extent over the last few years. Also, pet ownership, dogs particularly.
Yes.
We've been doing a lot of dog-related amenity spaces. So we just finished one in Winchester where we did a canine activity park. So it's an indoor dog room for dogs to be able to play. So when it's raining outside and they can't go to the outdoor dog park, they can take their dogs there. And it also had, as part of that, a pet spa where you can take to give your dog a bath or a grooming.
Oh, save you having to do it like in your bathtub or something.
Exactly.
Or so because I assume a lot of people have larger dogs, that makes it more difficult in a smaller space. Yeah.
Right. So we did a space that would accommodate larger dogs and a space that would accommodate smaller dogs.
Awesome. Okay,
because really it's best for the owner of the project too, because when you give a dog a bath, they're going to get water everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So it's best to design a space that specializes in that and also saves your clients' back or your residents' backs. Because we were able to raise those up a little bit to make it easier to bathe. But
imagine trying to get your Siberian Mastiff in the bathtub. I always use that one. They're like the biggest dog or something. You've ever seen? They're like monsters. I'm just like, can you just imagine just owning it? Like, and because that affects a lot of, I would assume that, especially with something like that, it would affect a lot of people's decisions about where they can go.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And pet-friendly communities are really something that a lot of our developers we work with are pushing.
Yeah.
So spaces to walk the dogs and spaces to let them run. But
Exactly. 'Cause it's in high demand. It's a lot of people. You see so many people
with dogs.
Well, it was when Elizabeth and I were my wife and I were in an apartment. We were the apartment like across from the dog park. I mean, that place was full from morning until 10 o'clock at night.
Yep.
There were people with dogs in the dog park. And the funny thing is, I would say, especially midday hours, between maybe like on weekends between 10 and 3, it was as much a people park as a dog park. They would all be sitting down and just chatting with each other.
Yeah.
Right.
And you realize that they went there, the dogs are off running around, but they were all sitting down, just chatting, having a good time, enjoying the outdoors.
It makes socializing so much easier.
Exactly,
it's like having kids where you have something in common with somebody, so you're automatically connecting with them on some level.
Yeah.
But
And you can let them bite each other, which you can't do with kids.
Right. Just let them run.
Exactly. On the trend topic, what trends maybe have you seen on the residential side?
Residential side, it's so different because every client is so different. Yeah. So it's really unique. There's a lot of really great kitchen innovations lately, smart appliances and all that. So it really depends on how much somebody likes to cook and how much they like smart technology.
Yeah.
But there's been a huge push for us with aging in place considerations. So making sure that the houses we design can accommodate everyone, whether that's something they're immediately concerned about or something they just plan on being in this house forever, and so they want to be able to stay in this house forever. So.
Oh, that's interesting. So you kind of design it such that it works for them now, but it'll also work, because I know that people always used to say that, in real estate that, you hit a certain age and you have to then go look for like the ranch style homes. You don't want stairs anymore and so forth. But I guess it's sort of, can we incorporate elements of that into the home we're building now?
Yeah, so a lot of people just, they'll still do their upstairs spaces, but they want a first floor master, they want a zero entry shower, they want enough room around the commode to be able to transfer over if that becomes something in their future. Kitchen, it's important to make sure everything's within reach. Microwaves under the counter is something we've seen a lot lately.
Okay, yes.
And then just making sure the front entry of the house, if there's no ramp there now, that it's designed in such a way that one could be added easily.
Interesting.
But we've seen people who have needs up to, they project that in the future they might need an elevator. They don't want to lose access to their basement or their upstairs space. So designing a well-placed closet and making sure the electrical equipment is sized correctly can make that an addition in the future.
Are we talking about an elevator like in a building where you press the button and it goes up, or are you talking about like the stair thing where you sit on the chair?
No, a full-on elevator. So
okay.
they do make residential size elevators. I can't remember whether we've put one in a house yet, but we have designed spaces where one can go in the future if needed.
Wow,
which is clever. Yeah, you don't have to take on the upfront cost of the elevator now because you don't need it, but you have a spot for it.
Right.
Where you know that when you go to put it in at a later date, you're not trying to figure out, oh man, do I need to tear down walls and do things?
Yeah, designing for it structurally is so important so you can have that shaft that goes up without a whole lot of back end work.
Oh, that's pretty neat.
That is kind of interesting. Yeah.
Have you seen? Because I happened to see something this morning. Purely by accident, it was actually Keith Smith from the Real Talk with Keith Smith had shared it. That a lot of people are purchasing multi-family homes. In other words, it's not multi-generational, I should say. Where in other words, have you begun to see people designing homes that can now incorporate an aging family member or parents at a later date?
Yeah, we do a lot of that. So whether the family is all moving together in the house we're actually designing, or whether they're designing for a potential future, we do a lot of spaces that will give enough privacy and yet have family very close by.
So is that more like because I remember, I'm just thinking of in New York, we have family members that they have their house, but like on the side they have a stairs and it leads to another room that you can't get one to the other
from the interior.
From the interior, is it more like that, or is it more like you can get to there from the interior, like there's a way in and out, but everything that they need is kind of like on their end or something like that?
We've done both.
Okay.
A lot of people tend to incorporate it into either a suite downstairs in like a terrace level basement, like a walkout basement,
gotcha.
People are incorporating it into a garage building. There are some people, I think one of my partners is working on one right now where it's a totally separate structure, so you wouldn't be able to access it from the interior, but it's right there on the property beside the main family house. So.
Interesting, okay. Because I was kind of curious, because that was my always things like, do people like more privacy? Because it's like, it's got to be somebody's in-law. So it's like, how does that play into the family dynamic?
It really depends on the family.
Right, it depends. But I was just kind of curious, because in New York, they're all like, separate, like it's privacy, and then you have to go down up and down stairs, and then that's it.
In Europe, sometimes they're very much like that one. My wife's family in Europe, it's kind of like that. That one, the son had moved, her uncle had moved into the old family home, but when I say right up the hill, I mean like 50 feet away. Her grandma had they built a small house.
Like a guest cottage type
kind
thing?
of like a guest cottage, but you literally, it was a stone's throw from one door to the other. But it was a separate building that kind of matched. But so you kind of you built something that you wouldn't have built it by itself to house someone, but you did it for grandma, so that she can be there.
I mean, we've done some where it's really the same living space for the different occupants, but one wing, like the primary bedroom wing, is just a bit larger than normal. It has a sitting area. It has a small coffee bar area. Yes. So there is that privacy when needed, but they still primarily share the main living space, kitchen and living room, etc.
That's not
I like it because like a hotel, you get your coffee. Because I noticed one thing that like everyone wakes up differently. And all the people that we know on the older side start getting up earlier and earlier, and they go for their coffee, and then it's
so you hear
clanking because they can't hear anymore, so they don't realize they're being loud. They're like, I'm being super quiet, and there's all the clanking, and you're like, I think somebody's up.
Right.
That's pretty clever. Yeah,
that's kind of neat. So you have your own coffee. Yeah, especially that. Like the first thing you do in the morning, have a cup of coffee. You wake up early. That's what you want. Yeah.
Yep.
That makes complete sense. So from a procedural perspective, so let's say people are interested, what kind of the process when people reach out to you? Let's say, I'm sure you do commercial, you do multifamily, those are probably their own universes. But from a residential person perspective, what's kind of the process when someone reaches out to you?
Yeah, so for all of our clients really across the board, we'll have an initial meeting where we want to hear what's your problem, what's the problem you're trying to solve. And so we like to give as much helpful information as possible, even with that first meeting, before we sign anything, just so we know we're clicking well, we know we're on the same page, we're listening to you and the things that you need. And then really from there, it becomes a series of meetings just to connect, make sure we're on the same page. Some people will have physical images they like to share with us. Now with Houzz and Pinterest, people can just pin images. We like to direct people to Houzz only because you can write comments under the images you save. So we know whether you like that wall color, but you don't like that stair. Or you like the built-ins there, but you want them a different style. So the more input we can hear from you about the things you like and the styles you like, the more we can really understand on a deeper level.
And do you help people in those initial stages? I would imagine one of the biggest questions, of course, is that people come into it with ideas of what they'd like, and then it's like, but can we afford everything that we want to do? Do you kind of help them early on gauge? Obviously, you can't, until you get a contractor involved, you can't know, okay, this is the final price. Do you try to help people say, just so you know, here's kind of where you're leaning? Because it's probably, I would imagine it's probably similar to real estate where, when you go to buy an existing home, if you're the buyer, you're like, oh, I should be able to find a home for this price. And of course, if you're the seller, like, well, my home is clearly worth more, right? So it's different. It's actually, I think a lot of people find it difficult to figure out what the value of a house actually is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you try to help them kind of work through that?
Yeah, so we'll try and prioritize the things that you're requesting and help you figure out what needs to stay in the budget and what are things you can compromise on that we can figure out a solution that's close, but that fits better into your budget. Yeah. And that's why we like to get contractors involved fairly early in the process, even with our multifamily and commercial projects. We prefer to know who that contractor is early on, because then we can really work as a team.
Work with them.
And I really like working as a team with these guys, because we're going to be involved in the same project for months, if not years for some projects. So we really, everybody has their specialty, everybody has their input, and being able to listen to everyone and form a team really gets the best product in the end.
Now, I have a question. How early do you prefer to get on for something like a residential project? Because I know, like, there's people that, I was once having this conversation with a friend of ours who's a realtor, and I was like, let's say somebody wants to build a house, or like they want to go buy a plot of land. Do you, just from a hypothetical standard, would you prefer to see it this way? You can say, don't buy this piece because there's nowhere to build it. So you would,
yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
You're already saying yes. I'm like, yeah.
We've had some clients that have brought us in that early in the process. Normally, when people come to us, they have land, they have an idea of what they want. But the clients who come to us before they purchase their land, we're really able to look at what the grade is doing and how they want to situate their house there. We can look at the sun orientation, which is really important when it comes to building science and environmental design. Being able to take advantage of the sun angles is really important, and that can really affect the way you want people to approach your house. So the earlier we can get involved, the better, although it's not typically the process, except for multifamily. We get clued into that early on multifamily projects a lot, which is helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it makes complete sense. As the earlier you get involved, there's more pieces where your advice can then come into play. Whereas, if it's like, hey, I already started building, it's like, wow, there's only so much.
For commercial, for apartments and such, we do a lot of feasibility studies for lots that just can tell people, how many units are you even looking at, the parking situation, and we try and design with the site as it is rather than trying to look at a flat site. So really that can save money by retaining walls. A lot of people try and flatten a site when they're there, and you get these large retaining structures, but if we can design from the beginning and sort of figure out where things can step, and that can make the process just a lot better in the long run.
Yeah, well, I mean, save them some future headache, but also, take advantage of maybe the interesting things you can do with the land if you don't just cookie cutter it and flatten it.
One of my favorite projects, which I wasn't involved in because this was before my time, but Stone Creek Village on 20 South near Monticello High School. My company did that before I was part of the company, but I love how that sort of builds up the hill. They took advantage of some of the parking under the buildings. Even the pool took advantage with the disappearing edge. And really from that intersection of 20 and Monticello, it's gorgeous. So that's one where I think that was really successful.
Exactly, you can do so much. It's I've driven by there, and it's always this, you kind of see it rising. It's almost like, somewhat like a castle, the way it kind of just goes up up the hill there.
Exactly.
And you wouldn't be able to do that if you just said, flatten it.
Exactly. So you lose a lot of the character of the place, I think. Absolutely.
Well, Adrienne, this has been so interesting. I feel like I've learned a lot and just have a great appreciation for what you do. If people are interested in reaching out, either commercially or residentially or multifamily, what's the best way to get in touch with your firm?
Sure. So we have offices in Charlottesville and Harrisonburg. And so our website is thegainesgroup.com. So that's TheGainesGroup.com. And you can reach out through the website, or we have a fairly active social media presence on Instagram and Facebook. You're more than welcome to reach out there, and we'll make sure we connect you with the right person for the project you're looking at.
Fantastic. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed this.
Same here. Thanks again. Hopefully we'll have you back in the future.
That would be great.
Have a good one.
You too.
I don't know, just it's one of my favorite things is just learning about each of the different.
And although I have to admit, it reminds me of how when we were in Rome, one of our tour guides was like, "You see that whole area up there?" And it's because the Romans had taken one of the hills, the emperor, and he just flattened the hill so that he could put his palace on it. And it was just like he just take the whole top off. But it's so interesting because even with them like design, because I remember there was a wall in Germany, and they were saying that you could tell two different architects worked on it because one half of the wall snaked and worked its way and worked with the natural landscape to grow. And then there was another guy that came in and was like, no, it goes in a straight line. And it's literally just a straight line because it doesn't matter. You flatten the hills, you cross the bridge, you do whatever you need to make it straight.
You cross that bridge.
So you see, like, if you look at it from like a topographical perspective, it's going like this, and also boom, it's straight. And it's like, well, that's the Romans. It's like you have one guy that's like, no, we work with everything. And then there's the other guy that's like, no, it's straight all the way.
No, it's just it's a beautiful thing, and it's just I've always been fascinated by how it's a combination of your kind of math foundational, make sure this holds together.
Yeah.
But also your beauty, your design, your art.
I have to admit, from the art perspective, for me, I would definitely say it is the one that combines the science and art the greatest. Yeah. By necessity, but also that makes it all the more impressive when you can do that. So.
Absolutely. So be sure to check out the Danes Group Architects. It's easy to find on Facebook. In fact, we're streaming there now, so you're out there. And thedanesgroup.com. So be sure to check it out. Switching gears just a little bit.
I'm going to let you choose which chart you want to look at first.
First today. Let's start with some of with the delinquency chart. And then we'll move to the crypto. We'll end on a slightly more interesting. I
think, to be fair, I'm not positive that that's a positive chart.
Yeah, but it's not quite as.
But my reason for putting it is because I actually thought it was not a good chart. I mean, it's good for crypto. It's just not good for everything else. But if we're going to start with delinquencies, then.
But I think what we want to just news-wise, I think we've kind of, not to harp on it, but we've been talking a little bit the last few weeks of when we've had finance topics. Michael and I talked about it a little, and Xavier and I talked about it a little.
Are you ready for it? Because I'll tell Judah which one to do. So Judah, the black chart, please. I did not name the charts when I sent them to Judah accidentally, but Judah named them himself, and so we are going with those.
Because we've been talking a little bit about, what are the underlying currents that we're seeing in the economy? Because obviously, the plain old-fashioned GDP number, right, has kind of been buoyed by consumer spending being resistant, to inflation, essentially, right? But I think charts like this show you. So this is a chart of 90-plus day credit card delinquencies and
of all ages, and it shows you credit card and auto loan.
So the blue line is credit card,
and the green line is auto loan. And you can see, so it starts in 2003 and it ends in basically at the end of 2023.
So what you can see here is,
so you can just see the spike just quickly. You can see, if you're watching, that major spike. How obviously it's 08 and 09. Then you had another kind of somewhat. It was growing right up until 2020, and then of course that. My assumption is that collapses because of the stimulus package. A lot of people paid off a lot of things that they had, right? So. I mean, that was. But the problem is now we're starting to see.
Also collapse in spending.
Yeah.
If you collapse spending, you collapse credit card debt.
Yeah, because and a lot of people were both being paid through. I think that's one of the things that we saw is that. Checking accounts went up way more than just the $2,000 because it wasn't just that the stimulus gave you $2,000.
Things you're not spending.
Some people were also, think about it, some businesses were continuing to work and get paid just remotely. So if you were still cashing paychecks and you got a $2,000 stimulus, you were able to wipe out a lot of credit card debt and auto loan debt. But now, as you can see from this chart,
it surpassed to those 2019 levels.
Yeah, and a lot faster.
So I think what this does show, in other words, headline numbers like consumer spending can mask the fact that spending, just consumer spending in GDP, so GDP, gross domestic product, that measures activity in the economy. It doesn't really care, GDP or consumer spending, where that activity comes from. In other words, did you finance that activity from your paycheck? Did you finance it by pulling money out of your investment accounts? Did you finance it with credit card debt? Did you finance it with a loan chart?
Yeah.
GDP doesn't care.
Through gambling.
Yeah, financial, because you went
made a good bet on the World Series. Yeah.
Right? GDP doesn't care.
Yeah.
GDP and consumer spending don't care where that money came from.
Right.
But where that money came from is a leading indicator, and it does tell you what may happen in the future. Because if that money came from, well, hey, I'm making more money than ever before, and prices are really low, so this is great. Well, that's a sustainable future, right? If it came from, well, I'm just racking up credit card debt, that's unsustainable. You can't keep doing that forever, because soon enough, you're unable to pay for the interest, and what happens? You begin to have delinquencies.
Right.
Which in this case, is delinquency is like, in other words, failure to pay after 90 plus days.
Right.
Right. And so what this is indicating is there is going to reach a point at which consumer spending cannot hold off the inflation. And that's kind of why I think you saw the Federal Reserve just a few days ago, Powell basically saying, look, we have no intention of decreasing rates anytime soon, right? Because he's sitting there saying, as bad as this is as bad as high rates are from a mortgage perspective and from a sucking the life out of the economy perspective, he cannot, with inflation where it is, they cannot allow it to continue to increase month over month. So the tricky part is, I don't know, this morning, there were some layoffs surged in February to the highest level since 2009. So, and that's not surprising in the sense that when you begin to suck money out, as higher interest rates do that, when you suck money out of the economy, and you have people who are not able to balance that out with increased spending, you will begin to have layoffs, because businesses must shrink. They have to respond to either decreased demand or increased costs. And interest rates is part of their cost. Almost all, your smallest business may not be borrowing, right? But almost all large to giant corporations borrow.
Right.
And when you increase their borrowing costs, you increase their costs, and higher interest rate increase their borrowing costs. So we're seeing, right, those challenges that the longer inflation goes, if the consumer cannot continue to compensate for it, you will begin to see the economy struggle in other ways. So that's, I think, the issue that we may be seeing.
Okay. And now here's a question for you that just came to me, so it's coming out of nowhere.
They just did these out of nowhere?
No, because I can't remember. So even though I'm the history guy, can't remember. Do recessions solve? Are there cases where recessions solve inflation problems? And I'm trying to think of one.
Where recession solved?
Yeah, where it's pulled back on inflation rather than the opposite.
Basically, 1920 to 21. So the depression of 2021, you have massive inflation,
right?
Coming out of the Woodrow Wilson years, right? So I mean, you're talking by 1918, 1919, inflation is.
There was massive inflation.
I mean, shirts like cotton dress shirts had reached $40, and remember, this is $40 in 1920 money.
Right.
So I don't even want to know. Basically, the equivalent, imagine like $500.
Yeah, for
your average shirt, and it's increasing throughout the day.
Right.
Right. So you have massive inflation. So what happens? The Warren G. Harding / Calvin Coolidge, because Harding doesn't live too long. Administration.
It was only a couple months, but he had done a lot of the major things.
But he did a lot of the major things, which Calvin Coolidge continued. Warren G. Harding, Calvin Coolidge, basically, they instruct the Federal Reserve. Not instruct, but like
they heartily suggested to the Federal
Reserve basically jacks interest rates up tremendously to squash inflation, basically saying let's pop this bubble. The Harding administration says we are not going to do anything to prevent a depression. In other words, we need to let the economy reset.
Yeah.
They do absolutely nothing. I think they cut taxes and spending, right? They don't even spend any money to compensate for the depression. You get a basically 25% unemployment rate, depression, prices plummet, but within 12 months it's over. Yeah. And the economy, then you get the roaring 20s.
Yeah.
So that's basically the last time, because the Great Depression was rather different. I don't know to what extent inflation was a was
factor.
a driver before.
I don't believe. See, that was the thing is I was trying to think. I don't remember if the Great Depression had an inflation issue as well. I know it did in the Weimar Republic.
Yeah, but not in.
But I don't know if America had the
States. And then when you get the 70s depression, that's stagflation. That's the example where you can have both a recession and high inflation because the money supply is out of whack.
Right.
My concern is that we probably resemble
more the 70s issues.
Yeah, the issue is the way government is operating today, fiscally, resembles the 1970s more than the 1920s. In other words, there is no indication that we are going to cut spending and allow a depression to crash prices.
No.
At which point, if you have, on the one hand, the Federal Reserve trying to quash inflation by sucking money out of the system and making it difficult for businesses to operate, but on the other hand, you have Congress just continuing to print money, essentially.
Yeah.
Right? You're not really lowering the money supply. You're not dealing with what may be one of the drivers of inflation.
The funny thing is, I'm almost, and I know a lot of people are very critical of Powell for raising rates, but at this point, if he's being so criticized, I almost wonder why he didn't raise rates even more. Just like raise rates because the problem is I've always had this idea that if you're going to do half measures are worse than full measures. And someday, like if you raise interest rates, but you don't raise them enough to quash inflation, but you raise it enough to be painful for everyone.
It could be thought he had, but the issue is also, do you
jack them up so much that you definitely take care of inflation and be like, I did my bit, and that's what I was supposed to do?
People saying you brought mortgage rates to 10.
I mean, but people are complaining that he brought them to 5. At the point which we even got to 5 or 4 or 5, people were complaining that he brought them up. So my point is that people are going to hate you for bringing them to 5, and it doesn't solve the problem. You might as well solve the problem and then say, at least I solved the problem.
But the question is, I mean, I guess you could argue to play devil's advocate, right? Would he even have solved it? Because if he does that, and then people are like, oh man, times are really tough because interest rates are at 10. Does Congress just go and spend, well, don't worry, we'll make it better for you. We'll spend a little more money.
I mean, that's the catch, but also it's one of those things that, like, there's got to be a point at which interest rates are so high that Congress can spend all they want, but nobody's borrowing because, like, it doesn't matter. You're not going to borrow and spend money. I mean, they could load money and then people just pocket it, and then that's it. I mean, to be fair, a lot of the money wasn't even staying domestic anyway. Although apparently the Republicans were arguing that it would come back around. But like, I mean, if you're giving money to other countries, I mean, that was one of the things they said about Obama's administration. They spent so much money, but a lot of it went into other country and other businesses, so that the money kind of immediately left America. The shovel-ready jobs thing wasn't true. A lot of the businesses that he was funding were overseas. Like so you don't get the hyperinflation because all these corporations were like using the money overseas, so the money was being sucked into the global economy, and so it didn't cause an inflation problem immediately. It just caused a debt problem.
Whereas now you might be looking.
Now you're looking at a situation where, like, you know, if a lot of the money is staying domestic or if everyone else is having inflation problems, you're just making everything worse. So it's a very it's a sticky situation. It's not easy to solve. As
he recovers, he's watching the show today. He says in the 70s, GDP was better than today.
That's true.
Which is just saying something.
Yeah.
The question is, how did we get this inflation rate? You know, and he thinks energy is a major.
Oh no, I think so too. Wasn't it in the 70s though too? Correct me if I'm wrong, Xavier. Didn't we have?
Yeah, there was oil prices in the 70s as well.
But I mean, and that's part of it too, is you have to move stuff from one place to the other. Like no matter how digital, like you can buy a house, not a house, you can buy a book on Amazon, but somebody's still got to ship it to you, and that costs oil. And of course, if it costs oil, then the price of oil is going to be a factor in the price of the book. So it doesn't matter.
And the disappointing difference is, let's face it, in the 70s, we did not know that we had the supply to actually counteract OPEC. Today we do. We're just choosing not to employ it, in a sense.
And our reserves, I saw a graph. I was going to send it to Judah, but it was way too complicated the way it looked. Really the reserves, and they did it graphically so that like the countries that had the biggest reserves were larger on the world map and the countries with the smaller. So of course it was interesting to look at, but the problem is I don't know how it would translate on the screen. But one of the things that the U.S. is one of the smallest countries for its size. Like, yeah, I mean, obviously you have got like places in the Caribbean and Africa where like they're minuscule, and of course the ones that make the most oil, like Venezuela, have the most. But Venezuela hasn't been shipping recently. Their output has declined. They just have a huge reserve. Saudi Arabia has a huge reserve, so of course that makes sense. But then you're looking, Canada has a larger reserve than we do.
Yeah,
and you're like, that Canada doesn't produce as much oil. Like, we have the capacity to produce more than Saudi Arabia, and yet our reserve is lower because we used our oil reserve to quash it immediately.
We've been spending out of the reserve to keep oil prices down.
Right, rather than just making oil. Not making oil, but drilling for oil.
But that's one of the challenges,
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges, and of course, like, you could be, obviously there's listeners with environmental concerns, but there's also the economic environment, and that also is unfortunately being exacerbated by the lack of oil.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's trade-offs with everything.
Right? I mean, everything has a trade-off. Like, you have to sacrifice. If you're sacrificing, I understand you're sacrificing the economy, but then you at the same time you have high oil prices, and you say, what is the cost at the same time?
And how is that impacting other aspects of the economy? While Xavier sends another question, maybe we can show the other.
Oh, is he sending another question?
He is. I can see the Xavier is typing.
Okay, so we're.
He asks, how does all of this impact the markets?
Well, shouldn't he come on and? He's a co-host of Today.
He wants the crystal ball. I
don't have a crystal ball. He should be on to do this because in 30 years, if he's wrong, who knows? He'll be 100 years old. He'll be fine.
Nobody's gonna care.
This is the perfect. If I'm even 30 years old, and people are like, you were wrong.
I think the challenge is that the markets. It depends. Does it always depend what the markets are looking at? Because in theory, you'd say, well, the markets, if they're going to respond to lower economic growth, right, then they would respond negatively. But if the markets respond to this by saying, hey, things are getting bad, Federal Reserve might lower rates again and turn the spigot back on, then you might see the opposite effect. You might see, in fact, the markets, particularly the equity markets, rally and say, well, if the spigot's going to be turned back on,
because think about it,
money will flow again, that's good for...
We just talked about, like, the Obama administration had the worst recovery in U.S. history, economically speaking. But the stock market did great.
Did really
so
well.
you sort of, you sit there and you're like, how does that, I mean, one thing is, though, at the same time...
It was free-flowing money. I mean, interest
right,
rates
that's
were
part
low.
of what it is.
Interest rates were low for basically almost a decade, from 2008 to...
And you saw a lot of mergers and buyouts, and one of the things I saw, there was a gentleman who was an economist, and he said part of what happened is that following the bomb, it was so low, the price of borrowing, that you were better off buying out your competitors than...
Or buying back your own stock.
Buying out your competitors. So what happens, a lot of these major corporations had all of a sudden huge revenue growth because I can just buy, instead of having a competition from a smaller business that could do something better, you just borrow money at 0% interest and buy them out. And of course, if you make anything over 0%, you're making money off that deal. So there was buyouts and mergers galore, and all these companies started getting larger and larger and larger because they were being fueled by an economy that had 0% interest rates and, but wasn't growing. So, of course, the stock market did great because the bigger the companies were, the better they did.
I think the key thing there, right, is Xavier makes this point, the key thing there is, from an investor's perspective, it does show that you need to remain in the markets. You can't be sitting there trying to figure out what direction it's going to go.
Right.
Because you could be in the midst of slower economic growth and yet experience some of the biggest days of the stock market that you don't want to miss out on.
Right.
So it just goes, he says diversification, which is really the key. You want to be diversified across the markets because you're not going to be able to predict which one is going to go up or down.
When Xavier's not on the show, he's like you're like your fifth grade teacher where she knows the answer, but she wants you to come up with it yourself. And then when you come up with something original, he's like, no, you should have said diversification. Which he's right. I was just saying it's kind of funny because like we went in a completely total different direction. He's like, no, you got to stay in the markets. Like that's what he was leading us to. He's correct, of course. And Alex and I both agree that you stay in for the long haul because you don't know where things will go. Like a bad economy doesn't mean the stock market would do poorly, and vice versa. Actually, maybe we'll talk. Maybe I'll do that chart next week. But I actually saw somebody was doing a chart of the Magnificent Seven versus the rest in the S&P, and it goes to show that a lot of the stock market recently has just been driven by the 7 largest companies, which I don't remember.
A few years ago when they pushed everything down.
Exactly right. So I mean, catch-22. If they form, and of course the larger portion of the S&P that they form, if they start to perform poorly and everything else starts to do well, then of course you're going to have the opposite effect where it looks like the economy, the stock market is struggling, but in reality it's just the Magnificent Seven. Everything else is catching up, so we really don't know how that it's going to be. Do you want to talk about?
Yeah, that's true. I think speaking of the markets, this is a particular market that has moved dramatically.
So white chart, please, Judah, when you have a moment.
And so the chart you're going to see in a moment is inflows to crypto funds. And so inflows meaning how much money is going into crypto funds. And you will see a massive spike in the beginning of this year after basically flatlining, and if anything, a bit of a negative period in between 2022 and 2023.
See, I found this chart concerning. I know you
I find it interesting. I wouldn't say. I was just saying it's not a oh my goodness bad news chart. It's what could this mean?
So
chart.
The reason I'll say this. The reason I found it concerning is because there has been a lot of discussion, especially among investors, about what role crypto will take in the future. One potential role that they had speculated on, following the pandemic, was whether or not crypto was going to become the next hedge against inflation. Now, obviously, looking at that chart, you can see that clearly did not happen, right? That it didn't become this thing that everyone dumped into crypto to stay safe from inflation because, inflation was much worse before, and you can see that money was going both in and out and kind of was stagnant after a little bump right before 2022. But my concern is, why is it that all of a sudden we're seeing a lot of entries into crypto? And my concern was that people are worried about the volatility of either this, because I think it's not even just, if I'm correct, I saw somebody say that it's this year's election cycle isn't just big for the United States. There's a tremendous amount of elections happening around the world. So there's going to be a lot of global shifts in political agendas. And so is it just that people are concerned about the future for 2024, or is this another leading indicator that we are not yet aware of because crypto hasn't been around long enough, that people are concerned about the economy and they say one thing that is not tied to the economy is a cryptocurrency, right? Because it does not function based on who's making money, how many if companies are making money. It is its own thing that it's dependent. I don't even know what the price is dependent on at this point.
Crypto's price, I think, for the most part, is dependent on right now. It's dependent on speculation.
Right.
In other words, it doesn't produce anything. Right. Yeah. I mean, there's no physical production.
It's not tied to gold. It's not tied to anything. So it's not even a fiat currency. Like it is not dependent on the ability of a government to pay their debt. So it is its own thing.
It is literally crypto is literally worth what the next person will pay for it. Essentially, from an investment perspective. The question is, the interesting is, like you said, what does massive movement into cryptocurrency foretell? Is it merely an economic sign? Is it a sign of economic uncertainty? Is it a sign of, is it becoming an inflation hedge? Do people think it's an inflation hedge, even if it might not have been over the past few years? I mean, we've had plenty of people suggest that it's an inflation hedge, even though when you look at the numbers, that clearly hasn't been the case.
Right.
But I think also the key with crypto is that I think it's as much a political barometer as a economic one. In other words, I think because of its selling point which granted, you and I know if you open up a Coinbase account with your name, right, and you buy crypto in it, you're not anonymous, right?
Yeah.
You're not, Coinbase knows who you are, and therefore banks who are connected to Coinbase.
And if you use an
know
Apple phone or a Lenovo or a Gmail, whatever,
Yeah.
they all know as
if
well. You're not anonymous
exactly,
anymore.
you're not really anonymous, right? But crypto has I would say, the reputation of being, well, I can buy what I want with it. It's not dollars. Maybe I won't be tracked. It's peer-to-peer encrypted, right? I think crypto has this sort of persona around it of if I think things are getting a little crazy, maybe I want to be in crypto. And so the question is I think things are getting, do people believe things are getting crazy economically, or do people are just worried about uncertainty from a political level?
Yeah.
And I think that is the question, is what exactly is this foretelling? It's difficult to say, but I found it a fascinating chart because this is a movement of a size that we have not seen in, at least from this chart. You're talking 6 years. We have not seen a movement anywhere near this size. And this movement is double the last biggest movement we had.
I think more than double. If I'm correct.
It looks like more than double.
Yeah.
The last biggest movement we have had, which was in 2021 to 2022.
Right.
Also, interestingly, prior to an election year, even though it was a midterm year.
Right.
But I think that's the question. It's always interesting to kind of speculate and think about what, because like you said, crypto has not been around long enough for us to reliably say it is a leading indicator of X.
Well, it's weird because it's one of those things where we don't know what it's going to eventually indicate. Like, eventually it's going to have some role in the economy in some sort. Like, it's either going to be a hedge or it's going to be an indicator of volatility. It's going to do something because people are eventually going to rely on it for a certain reason because it's going to start correlating.
We just don't know what that is.
But we don't know what that is yet. So the question is it an uncertainty indicator? And like, that's what you seem to be like suggesting, is that it could be a
that
political.
Would be my guess at the moment.
Yeah, and to be fair, like that would look.
Xavier makes a good point. Obviously, one also thing that has changed in recent years is the ability to invest in it using ETFs. So in other words, as it becomes more accessible to invest in crypto, do more people do it? In other words, are there people who are putting money into crypto now who weren't doing it before? But before, you had to open a Coinbase account, you had to do a currency exchange, but now you just go and buy an ETF, which he feels may be the scarier point. In other words, are there going to be people that are encouraged to do this when maybe their risk tolerance would suggest that they should not?
Maybe
it's the cool new thing to.
It's been around long enough. I don't know if it's still the cool new thing or just people feel like safer. It's almost like gold. We see a lot of people who talk about, like, is gold a safer option? Of course, there's a catch-22 to gold, which is that you've got to pay to either store it, or the ETFs can be very expensive to hold gold. Then if you go with gold miners rather than then you're relying on a business, not necessarily just the price of gold, because then there's another layer of risk to that. So there's a lot going on. I mean, it's true, if it's easier to buy, it's easier to get in and out of, but does that mean we're also going to see a stronger correlation with something that materializes because more people will be, like, how many people would have bought Bitcoin but had no idea how to buy Bitcoin 10 years ago? Or and maybe even in 2020, maybe before the last presidential election, people would have been like, Trump versus Biden is, what are we going to do? It's another Trump election. Like, how do I hedge against the volatility of this pandemic thing and all that? And they wouldn't have been able to do it to the same degree they can now. And now we're going to start seeing it form a pattern. Or maybe even on the inflation hedge thing too. I mean, how many people, we always hear gold is an inflation hedge, but how many people like buy gold over the counter in the old days? I mean, only a certain amount of people were doing that. Yeah, would have done that. So
it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, maybe it'll start having a personality of its own in the markets.
You never know. So an interesting chart. I would say the key thing also to keep in mind with crypto is, I always ask people this: if you're thinking about it, you really need to ask yourself why. In other words, if you're saying, "Oh, should I buy a crypto ETF?"
Oh, okay.
Ask yourself.
I think you said why the chart was going up.
Why
okay,
do you want
crypto
to do it? Why do you want crypto in your portfolio? Because anything can be a good or a bad investment. It depends on what your goal is, right? And so if it's not as though crypto is always a bad investment or that it's always a good investment. It's, well, what are you trying to achieve, right? And so if you're like, I just want a little growth in my portfolio, if you're going to retire in 5 years, is crypto the way to do it? Should it be a significant part? And then if your answer is, well, no, I want to be able to, buy things, but without being tracked. I want to be anonymous, right? I want to get away from the system. Well, then buying a crypto ETF does none of that, because everyone knows that you own the crypto. Yeah. In other words, you're not anonymous, you're in the system. So it really depends on what is your goal. So you really need to ask those kinds of questions, particularly when it comes to more esoteric investments, like cryptocurrency or like gold. If you're interested in gold, ask yourself why. Because I actually was on Jerry's show that Judah once made the great point with the gold bars that I like to use. That you'll see people say, well, what if everything collapses? I want gold. And Judah's like, what are you gonna do? Shave off? Like, you can't buy the chicken with the gold bar. Yeah. It's worth too much. And what are you gonna do? Shave off pieces of gold to give to someone? So in other words,
if you're worried about that, you need to be the one that owns the chicken.
Exactly.
It's my point has always been, don't be the guy that's like, I'll buy everything from everyone else, because like you're target. You either need to be the bully and just, I guess, steal stuff and just rob everyone, or you got to be the guy that owns the chicken, right? That's really it.
You really need to think about what you're doing.
I was going to say, think about the gold rush, 1849. In California, we grew up on this because we grew up in California.
Who made the most money? Wasn't the gold miners.
It was never the gold miners who made the money. It was Levi Strauss who made jeans. It was the guy who made the guys that sold the chickens. It was the guy that owned the tavern. It was the guy that sold the pans. Like, those people made the money because everybody needed those things, and not everyone was finding gold. Yeah. So you got lucky if you found gold, but nobody had to get lucky selling food because everyone needed to eat. Mm-hmm. So if you're really worried about the apocalypse, don't start looking at cryptocurrencies and gold. Start looking for chickens. I mean, that's really it. I mean, if that's really what you're worried about, own the chicken, not the gold.
Exactly. So it's always about why are you looking at it? Yeah. What is your goal? And that will determine whether it's a good investment. Hence why you should talk to professionals who can help you ask those questions.
Exactly.
Well, this has been an interesting show. I feel like we covered a lot of different things.
And glad you liked the charts.
I did like the charts. Always fun to have Nick on with some interesting charts to talk about. Always fun to have Xavier, giving us some great questions and tips.
That was far less fun.
Appreciated all our guests that tuned in today. Definitely appreciate having Adrienne on. Be sure to check out the Danes Group Architects. Next week, we're going to have Joy Ting Wine.
Yes.
She's a
Joy Ting with Joy Ting Wine.
Yeah, with Joy Ting Wine.
And Matthias Yon Realty.
Is going to be coming on. She's a research enologist. And exchange coordinator. So that's going to be fascinating. And Matthias, going to be our monthly meetup with Matthias.
An enologist throws you off, right?
Yeah. I was like, is that spelled wrong? Should it be ecologist? But no, it's an enologist. Enologist. We'll have to, in between now and then, I'll have to research what that is. And then Matthias, I'm going to be coming on for our monthly meetup with Matthias, which is always a great time. So be sure to check that out. Appreciate everyone tuning in today. Thanks for being here with me, Nick.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Always good to have you on. Thanks to Judah behind the camera. Love being here on the I Love CVille Network set. Thank you to our great partners, Matthias Yon Realty, Credit, Sirius Insurance, Forward Adelante. Thanks to our presenter, Emergent Financial Services. Thanks to all of you who tuned in and joined us. We look forward to seeing you next week. But until that time, hasta mañana.